All right, everybody, we got to talk about this. Mike Malone has been named the new head coach of the UNC Tar Heels. This is a name that we started to hear about last week, and all of the search craziness that's been going on. Brian Murphy's here joining me. Brian, this is kind of a surprise hire. We were just kind of going over it. You don't often hear, especially in basketball, of a pro coach coming down to the college level. And so this is somebody, he was an assistant in college a long time ago, but the bulk of his career has been in the NBA. How do you see this work?
Let's first talk about how we got here, right?
Yeah.
You started to hear this name pop up late last week. Malone's daughter plays volleyball at North Carolina and has been a presence on campus. We've seen pictures of him with UNC sweatshirts on, apparently has been attending practices occasionally, and that's how we got to know some of the decision makers here. Look, they went after Tommy Lloyd. They went after Dusty May. It looks like they went after Billy Donovan. Today, Chicago fired its general manager and other front office personnel. Leads me to believe that Billy Donovan's going to get more power in Chicago, not less. Reports coming out now that UNC tried to reach out to Ben McCollum at Iowa. He turned down an invitation to even talk about the job. TJ Otzelberger at Iowa State kind of pulled his name out early, and so you can kind of see how you get to somebody like Michael Malone if the premier college coaches don't want to come. The NBA season hasn't ended. He doesn't sound like he wants to come, Billy Donovan. We've got an out-of-work coach who's not going to cost you anything in the buyout, which I think is important.
Yeah.
And has been around your campus, familiar probably with some of your players, some of your administrators. And now Michael Malone, it appears, is going to be the next head coach at UNC.
One of the things I'd been hearing is that UNC's donors gave UNC $15 million to handle their coaching situation. That will be enough to buy out Hubert Davis. That'll be enough to buy out the next coach so they could get to a coaching search. Now they don't have to use a lot of that money, a lot of that 15, about 10 million or a little bit less than that for a buyout for Mike Malone. He was already available. So maybe this could go towards the roster, and that was one of the things we had been hearing with the Hubert Davis is that the donors didn't want to pay for another roster for him. When we look at the kind of the overall big scope here, we're starting to see more of a blend between the NBA and also college. If you see John Shire's staff for last year, Evan Brads was part of Salt Lake City, Utah Jazz. I keep mixing up the name, Utah Jazz, and he came down to college. Now he's a head coach at Belmont. And now we see a guy from the NBA now who was a head coach being a head coach in the college ranks. Like the two are starting to merge together a little bit more.
A lot of that is because of the way you have to construct your roster.
Yes.
We also saw the BYU coach is a former NBA assistant who went to be the head coach at BYU, and they landed A.J. DeBonta, of course, the number one player in the country, probably the number one pick. I want to know a couple things. Who's going to be on his staff?
Yeah.
Like, you've got to get some guys with college experience, recruiting experience, I would think, on your staff. Although, if you hear these coaches talk late into the Final Four, Dusty May included, who was a candidate at this job, talked about recruiting is easier than ever. You call the player, you talk about a number, and if the numbers match up, maybe he comes, and if the numbers don't match up, you move on to the next guy.
Yeah.
You're not spending hours and years cultivating these relationships.
Yeah.
A pro coach may have more experience in being able to put a roster together like that. Still a shocking hire. I want to know whose assistants are going to be. I want to know if a guy like Sean May is going to stay on the staff.
Yeah.
And then I also want to know, what is his recruiting philosophy going to be? We look at Illinois. Illinois has built that team with a superstar freshman and a lot of international players. Well, he coached one of the greatest international players in NBA history in Nikola Jokic. Has some ties from some of the reporting out there to Jokic and to kind of Eastern Europe and the area that's producing a lot of these players who are coming over. Can they, UNC had Bogovac this year. Can they land several of these better European players? And is that a quick way to rebuild? So a lot of interesting things with Mike Malone.
And the way that I guess Hubert Davis was trending towards as he was, kind of heading out, he was trying to get bigger. We saw that this past year. And when Mike Malone won that 2023 championship, that was a big team. And you had a guy who's a 7-footer who is helping you initiate offense, right? So, going to your point, it'll be interesting to see if you can get a guy of that stature who can help you initiate offense. Of course, we've been seeing that a lot more on the college ranks. Staff is going to be big, but I was also going to bring up Jim Tanner, who's their GM, who, has NBA experience as an agent. He could potentially help out with, helping him merge into the college game.
Well, you wonder, does Jim Tanner stick around?
That's true.
If Mike Malone had been a college coach, a Byington or a McCaslin or somebody like that, he probably would have wanted to bring in his own GM. But Mike Malone's been on campus, been at practice. Maybe he keeps Jim Tanner in that position. And the size, I think, really matters. Look at the Final Four this year.
Sure.
Look at what Duke's been able to do the last couple of years. Sure. Giant positional size. I mean, the recruiting is going to be the biggest part. The transfer portal opens at midnight tonight, Tuesday morning, and UNC is obviously going to have players in it. They're obviously going to want to sign some players out of it. Now that at least they have a coach, or at least they intend to have a coach, still got to get this contract through the board of trustees, still got to do all the formalities. UNC has not officially announced it as of this moment, but at least you have a coach when that portal opens. It's going to be super important to being competitive in your first year.
And we've already seen a couple players from Carolina hit the portal as well, and they're still kind of up in the air as what's going to happen with their 2 5-stars that are supposed to come in next year. This may end up helping, right? Because if you're a 5-star, you more than likely are looking to try to make that NBA jump in a year or two. And this is somebody who knows all about it from a championship level.
Yeah, I mean, and we can talk about all the positives. Obviously, NBA championship head coach, you know, that college NBA meld, all that. This is still a big swing.
It is.
At a coach who does not have a ton of college experience. We saw what happened with Bill Belichick, probably the greatest NFL coach of all time, coming to college, and it didn't work out exactly the way I think UNC envisioned or Bill Belichick envisioned. Now you're going and getting another coach who's all of his experiences is in professional basketball. How is it going to work? How is it going to translate in year one?
Yeah.
Now you've taken 2 big swings with 2 professional coaches for men's basketball and football. It's got to work. If you're UNC and you're the administration there, this one has got to work.
I was going to say, like, if you're betting on something to work, it will probably be basketball versus football, mainly because I would think, and maybe we should ask somebody who really knows, who's played both games, it feels as if it'll be easier because there's a lot less moving parts in basketball than what there is in football. If Bill Belichick has to, basically, look over 115 different players, plus, a larger staff, things like that. Mike Malone, really, if he nails it with his biggest 7 or 8 players and gets a nice bench behind them, you're talking about maybe 12 guys and then like whatever support staff he needs. There's not as much for him to manage, so it could be easier. Could be, but we have to see what ends up happening.
The last point I would make, I think, is that this points out how difficult it is to hire a sitting head coach.
Yes.
You're North Carolina, you're one of the best 5 jobs in the country, we'll call it that. It's still not easy to hire. If you're a Tommy Lloyd and you're already in the Final Four at Arizona, if you're Dusty May, you're already in the Final Four at Michigan, you're Dan Hurley, whose name came up, you're playing for a 3rd NCAA championship. Even if you're a Ben McCollum or a Mark Byington and you've got it rolling at the place that you're at, it is really tough. We've seen it in football as well. It's really tough to hire established coaches and say, we're going to pick it all up and start it all over here, because in this NIL era, that history and tradition probably mean less than they ever have. And so if you're at Vanderbilt or you're at Iowa, you can get the same NIL budget. You can get the same players. You don't have to try to do it again. If I've got it working one time, I don't need this restarted somewhere else. So we saw that with Kurt Cinetti, right?
For sure.
He could have had any job in the country that he wanted after winning the national title. Decided, nope, I want to stay at Indiana. I've already got it rolling here. We've got the NIL budget. We'll just stay here. I don't need to go to Florida State. I don't need to go to Penn State. I can build this here. And I think a lot of coaches are seeing that in basketball as well. I'll just build it where I am because I've got the infrastructure. I've got the administration. I've got the budget. I don't need the history and tradition.
And the quick turnaround. Like you said, it opens at midnight. So really pretty much an hour after the last basket goes in for the national championship game tonight, the portal will be open and ready for business. So you're talking about a guy like that. If it was Dusty May and he's playing in the game tonight, you literally have to shift your focus from I either lost or won this game, this big game, biggest game of my career, to now I have to go to the portal and figure out how to get guys at this other school that I'm trying to go to. So you're right. It's probably a lot easier for coaches who already have something going on just to stay, and somebody who's, unemployed, for lack of a better word, to essentially walk in and start fresh, and especially when Carolina is under the gun and they want to make sure they can field a competitive team next year.
The interesting thing to me is, Michael Malone would have been a candidate for numerous NBA jobs. We think maybe as many as 10 NBA jobs are going to come open. He would have been on the short list for every single one of them, including Orlando. I mean, think about places, that underachieved this year, or think about a title contender who flames out in the 1st or 2nd round.
Yeah.
Michael Malone would have been a hot name.
Yes.
I'm not saying that's one reason Carolina jumped, but he could have waited. He certainly could have waited and gotten an NBA paycheck starting next year.
One of the interesting questions that I think I would like to ask is, what are his goals with this? Does he wants to use this to get back to the NBA? Does he see himself where he wants to stay in college for the rest of his career, or for at least 10 years? Because you would think with the move that Carolina made to get here, that the next coach they'd want them to be there for at least 10 years. So that'll be something that's interesting. He's 54 years old. He's definitely got a lot of time left in coaching, but what does he want to do with that time that he does have left if you think about another good 15 years possibly for him?
And the first question you asked me, like coaches that come from the pros down to college,
Yeah.
I cannot think of one off the top of my head. You know, a Rick Pitino, a John Calipari, they were established college coaches
Yes.
who went to the pros
Yes.
and then came back because it didn't work. Obviously, Mike Krzyzewski was offered the Lakers job. Dan Hurley was offered the Lakers job. We've seen it go that way. I'm trying to think of a really successful NBA coach
It's not coming
that
to me.
then decided to come
Yeah.
and coach in college. And off the top of my head,
I'm trying to think of his name, but he was the coach at Indiana, and he coached at the Atlanta Hawks. But he recently got fired
Mike
from
Woodson.
Indiana. Mike Woodson.
yeah. But he did not win an NBA championship.
He didn't win an NBA championship, so it is different. But he was an NBA coach
Right.
that came down, and it didn't work out for him.
Right.
But that's like the best example I can think of.
Yeah, and there probably are
somebody.
some from the past.
Yeah.
But interesting. We have seen assistants move around,
Yeah.
assistants from the NBA come down and be college coaches. Really, a lot of questions for Mike Malone, for UNC, for how this search went, and hopefully we'll start to get them in a couple of days.
So we'll see what questions will be answered. Hopefully we'll have a press conference coming up very soon. Make sure you stay tuned with WRAL, all of our platforms, and we'll have you updated on the latest as Mike Malone is reported to be the new head coach of the UNC Tar Heels.